You're listening to Through Our Lens with the Disabled and Non-Disabled Alliance at Sacramento State, a club, organization, whatever, for disabled students, staff, and their allies to discuss and educate each other about disability-related topics, advocate on behalf of disabled students and the community, and to hang out together and just be a community.
So we want to be more recognizable to Sac State. So please join the conversation by following and messaging us on Instagram at Dana@SacState. It's DANA@SacState. Hi everyone, welcome to the 9th episode of Through Our Lens with the Disabled and Non-Disabled Alliance. This is a podcast where we have a conversation on disability. My name is Brian Tao and I'm one of the officers and the host of this podcast. Our topic today is just going to be about the book Dare to Lead, Brave Work, Tough Questions, Whole Hearts by Brene Brown. But before we kind of get into the discussion, Rianne has a couple of announcements for new officers for next year.
Right. So not all of our officers will be able to continue being officers next year. So we're putting out a call for more officer candidates. Being an officer for the club is not as intimidating as it sounds. It's mostly just goofing off. And the more officers there are, the easier it is to run the club. There are 5 official officer positions: president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, and communications director. The ones that need to be filled to keep the club up are president and treasurer. No prior knowledge or experience is required. If you have a fear of public speaking, that's totally understandable. You don't need to speak publicly to be an officer, and you still have that opportunity to work on that fear if you are an officer, but you don't have to. Us current officers will help pass on the knowledge and training that you need to keep the club running, and you can just take it from there, make it your own, but we'll make sure that you aren't fumbling around in the dark. On a related note, we're also putting together an Activism Committee and an Events and Recruitment Committee. This is a great way for members to get more involved with the club without being an officer. If you've ever wanted to contribute to activism efforts or help organize events, let us know. You can reach out to us about being an officer or a committee member at dana.sacstate@gmail.com.
Yeah, that's a really good announcement. For officers, we're just looking for people who are passionate about disability and who just want to kind of promote disability in the conversation. William, do you have anything else to add?
Not especially. The means of becoming an officer will become clear as we go along here. But part of it is we have to do an election. Part of it is I'm going to make a Google form, which will be made available most likely on the Discord server first and foremost, which will allow you to nominate yourself for various officer and committee positions that we have going on. Following that, there will be some kind of election before the end of this semester, I believe, so that we can. I was going to say indoctrinate. That's the wrong word. Emulate? No. Initiate new officers before the start of fall 2023. Or 2022. I mean, yeah, ideally before 2023.
Makes sense.
So yeah, that will be coming forthwith. Also, to those who have a keen eye, you'll notice I'm not in my normal office. This is my parents' home office, whose computer is huge but completely non-functional, which is exactly the sort of thing I would expect from my parents. Thank you.
Makes sense. And that's it for our announcements. Let's move on to the nitty-gritty of the podcast. Okay, as always, it's going to be a very free-form format, so expect a conversation with many tangents, just like how a real conversation would go. I'm here with the president and founder, Rian and William. Yeah, and we also have a new guest, a member of the Disabled and Non-Disabled Alliance, Kimberly Butcher, to kind of join the conversation. And as we have a new guest speaker, I want to do some quick introductions with each of us and for our audience. So William, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. As many people know, my name is William Wyatt. I'm a philosophy major here at Sacramento State, and I'm in my second to last semester now, give or take. Probably not going to be continue to be president of Dana in fall 2022. I guess we'll see where the chips fall. I think I'd still be technically eligible. Anyway. Yeah. And I'm hoping to be a politician. That's part of why I'm doing this.
Yeah,
For
and
selfish reasons. Yeah, Rihanna, go.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rion Dinsans. I use they, them pronouns. I'm currently a child development major, and I am going to be transferring to Cal State East Bay in the fall, which is very exciting and also depressing because I'd really like it here at Sac State, but it's for a lot of personal reasons, all of which include personal safety, you know, pandemic wise. So, because it's still happening. But yeah, I will be continuing my major there and hopefully finish my degree within the next couple of years. I have like a little over 90 units, so I think I can just push through and finally get that degree, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and then me, my name is Ryan Tao. I am an environmental studies major, and I want to become a city planner, just to be a part of projects to improve public transportation, make it more accessible, basically. And then finally, there is Kimberly. Can you give like a quick introduction of yourself?
Hi, I'm Kimberly, and I'm an Asian Studies major, emphasis Japanese, minor in global leadership, and yeah, I'm happy to be on the show today because yeah, this is exciting. I love your show. I love your group.
We're glad to have you.
Yeah, glad to have you. I guess we can move on to straight to the discussion. Our discussion is just going to be on the book, on section 4, shame and empathy, dare to lead, brave work, tough questions, whole hearts, by Brene Brown. Kimberly, can you talk a little bit about the book? Because I'm not really familiar with it.
Yeah, so actually I'll be honest, it was a requirement for one of my classes, and as I like began listening to it, I don't know, I guess I was kind of like shocked in a way to realize like how different human emotions trigger other human emotions, which cause reactions, which inevitably can actually relate to the business culture and politics and school, everything. It's so, yeah, so there's a little snippet that I have to share today, and it's called the 1, 2, 3s of shame. So let's just dive right in. So I was thinking we could listen a bit to what so Brene Brown is the author. She reads her own audiobooks, so it'll be her talking, and she'll just be reading section 4, shame and empathy, from her book. So let's just dare to lead, as you said, dare to lead, as you said. So let's give a listen and see how it goes.
All right, let's.
Okay. All right, here we go.
Let's start with shame 101. Because I always like to start with the shame 1, 2, 3s. 1, we all have it. Shame is universal and one of the most primitive human emotions that we experience. The only people who don't experience shame are those who lack the capacity for empathy and human connection. So here's your choice. Fess up to experiencing shame or admit that you're a sociopath. Quick note, this is the only time that shame seems like a good option. Number 2, we're all afraid to talk about shame. Just the word is uncomfortable. 3, the less we talk about shame, the more control it has over our lives. First, shame is the fear of disconnection. As we talked about in the myths of vulnerability, we are physically, emotionally, cognitively, and spiritually hardwired for connection, love, and belonging. Connection, along with love and belonging, is why we're here, and it's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. Shame is the fear of disconnection. It's the fear that something we've done or failed to do, an ideal that we've not lived up to, or a goal that we've not accomplished, makes us unworthy of connection. Here's the definition of shame that emerged from my research. Shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we're flawed and therefore unworthy of love, belonging, and connection. Shame drives two tapes, Never Good Enough and Who Do You Think You Are? These gremlin-like voices work as a terrible vice. Right when you overcome the not good enough whisper and muster up the courage to enter the arena, the shame gremlins hit you with, wow, you think you have what it takes to pull this off? Good luck. The Texas gremlins would say, don't get too big for your britches, sister. Retreating into our smallness becomes the most seductive and easiest way to stay safe in the midst of the shame squeeze. But as we've talked about, when we armor and contort ourselves into smallness, things break and we suffocate. Here are some of the responses we received when we asked people for an example of shame. Shame is getting laid off when we're expecting our first child. Shame is hiding my addiction. Shame is raging at my kids. Shame was my response to seeing my parents' shame when I came out. Shame is covering up a mistake at work and getting caught. Shame is watching things change so fast and no longer knowing how and where I can contribute. Shame is failing at my business after my friends invested in it. Shame is getting a promotion, then getting demoted 6 months later because I wasn't succeeding. Shame is my boss calling me a loser in front of our colleagues. Shame is not making partner. Shame is my wife asking me for a divorce and telling me that she wants children, but not with me. Shame is getting sexually harassed at work, but being too afraid to say anything because he's the guy everyone loves. Shame is constantly being asked to speak on behalf of all Latinos in marketing meetings. I'm from Kansas. I don't even speak Spanish. Shame is being proud of a completed project than being told it wasn't at all what my boss wanted or expected. And then last, and certainly not least, because this is one of the greatest shame triggers at work. Shame is watching things change so fast and no longer knowing how and where I can contribute. The fear of being irrelevant is a huge shame trigger we're not addressing at work. We may not be able to relate to the exact examples, but if we know ourselves and are in touch with our vulnerability, we can recognize that unbearable pain in other people's experiences. Shame is pain and feelings of rejection that shame brings are as real as physical pain. Emotions can hurt. And just as we have to describe, name, and talk about physical pain to heal it, we have to recognize and talk about shame to get out from underneath it. This is even more difficult than talking about physical pain because shame derives its power from being unspoken. That's why even the word shame is tough to say.
Hey, Kimberly. Do you want to pause right now so we can talk about it?
Yeah, it's kind of a lot to take all at once.
Yeah, we could just pause now.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Okay.
First off, I don't know, kind of the way she started talking about how you need to have empathy to feel shame, and essentially called you a sociopath and framed that as a bad thing. I don't know, just a lot of red flags there for me because there's a big issue of conflating empathy and the ability to be kind and conflating sociopathy with being a horrible person. Those two things are not equal at all. If you have a lack of empathy, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't be kind or that you can't care about other people. It just means that it shows up differently, you know. But I do agree that shame is a very universal type emotion that can be incredibly overwhelming and controlling. I experience shame a lot, and I feel like it's something that a lot of minority groups, including and especially disabled people, face because we are living in a society that tells us our very existence is wrong,
My question first and foremost is what is it you're hoping that people take away from that section that we read or that we listened to, Kimberly?
Oh, the section that we're in. You mean the title?
No, not the title of the book. The section that we just listened to, which was describing shame and its functions and its origins and such.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that because I missed the first part what you asked?
I'm wondering what it is you want people to take away from what they listened to here today.
Oh, okay. Well, it's not done, but I think I guess the fact she keeps on going. I think she's kind of starts talking about how like it's important to have empathy. Like I guess she's saying that to understand that everyone's coming from a different place, to be like more I don't know, towards the end she just kind of like says you need to remember that humans are human, like I guess the fact that I don't know, like for example, sometimes when people as Rian said, like exactly, the society kind of tells us because of our disability something, but then I don't know, to kind of think, I guess reversely, that to try to keep thinking that like have empathy with the fact that they, I don't know, are kind of like, I don't know, some people are like that, but they can't I guess to try to like have empathy even when people are mean to me, rather than take it in and feel hurt by it, I guess.
I think I get what you're saying.
I kind of reversed what she's saying in my mind, but I somehow it helps me to like understand something.
Yeah, it's because the thing is that when society is the one saying, oh, this isn't supposed to be like this, you're not supposed to be like this, then naturally the discrimination that you face on a personal level isn't always because that person is inherently a bad person. It's maybe because society has taught them that they should hate you, that they should undermine you, that they should underestimate you. And not everybody has to put up with that. You're not obligated to be a bigot's teacher if society is the one that turned them into a bigot, but it is something to keep in mind that hate is taught and shame is also taught. So that can be a great starting place if you want to be the one to help deconstruct that in other people and help people face their own prejudices and shame surrounding disabled people.
Yeah, I think for me, like I think people feel shame because of like society's like feelings, right? And like if you don't, like I guess like starting out, like you do something that's kind of like shameful to society, it's like you don't really know that it's shameful at all, but people tell you that it's shameful. So it's like it's always like in your head, right? Like you don't think it's shameful, but it is, like to other people.
Yeah, and like the author said, shame is a social thing, so it would make sense that it would go hand in hand with societal systemic discrimination. It's kind of this underlying current underneath so many forms of prejudice. This is wrong because it's shameful,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but like, why is it shameful? It's all because of society.
I
Exactly.
like that connection. Like shame and guilt, it has as tools of oppression go back. I mean, as far as any other, tool of oppression does, which is basically to the beginning of the human experiment. But it's interesting to start thinking about those things alongside things like capital as an instrument of oppression. Because obviously we have the particular conceit in American society where if you don't have very much capital, clearly you should be ashamed. Like, what's also interesting, like functionally, structurally about shame is that it seems to stick around even after you got the experience of exclusion. Like, it doesn't diminish in the way that you would expect it to, because you've had a lot of experiences with exclusion. Because if it's meant to be the fear of exclusion, and this makes sense as part of its like social functionality. If it's meant to be the fear of exclusion, then you would think that once you've you've gotten fired or you've gotten divorced or whatever it is, you've gotten like left out, you've gotten picked last in the game of dodgeball, you would hope that like you would now have experienced the shame. Like that would be as far as it goes. But no, it sticks around. It sticks with you. And that can be important to talk about when we talk about like early childhood development and stuff. It can be even
she
traumatic.
goes into that next. She starts talking about how these people, exactly what you just said, exactly, teachers, bosses, how that affects the child, affects us, sticks with us. And then the way that she ends it, I know it started off a little bit rocky, but the way that she ends this section that I wanted to share is that she kind of says you need to remember the human, so like that's the thing. Yeah, and then I think for me, I as a younger person, like as a child, like in kindergarten and elementary school, like I didn't really, I of course did not understand like what was going on around me. I just knew people were being mean to me, but I didn't, because I was different or whatever you want to say, but I didn't like identify exactly. I didn't really know. I mean, I just thought I was a human. I didn't really notice that, other people noticed before I did that I was different. But the point is, without knowing, I was feeling shame, and that shame turned into anger without knowing it. So as a young child, I didn't understand the term empathy. I didn't understand that like I have to be empathetic, that they are ignorant, and then I that's I guess another topic, ignorance, but the fact that it's not always the person's intention, and you don't have to take that in as shame, even though they can't have empathy. It doesn't mean that you can't either. Like I guess that's kind of what I took away from it, is like it's it's hard, but it's like you can almost, instead of taking in the bad words or the lack of their lack of intelligence or whatever you want to say, to letting that affect me or us or anyone and taking it in as shame doesn't help like anything. So the fact that I got from this is that I can do something about it. Maybe I can't make them stop. Maybe I can't teach them otherwise, or make them see the reality of the situation, but all I can do is be more empathetic, that people are people and everyone has limitations, and maybe their limitation is being open-minded or being like I don't know, maybe that's part of their limitation. So I don't need to take that in as shame and hurt myself with it. I guess that's what I took from this.
Yeah, and that reminds me quite a lot of the perils of going undiagnosed as a kid. Everybody around you seems to know that there's something different about you, but you don't know, and you know, you can't ask them because that's why they're making fun of you. And the shame that comes with that goes hand in hand with the trauma that can come with that as well, where you know that there's something wrong, and the fact that you can't figure out this social situation, you can't figure out why they're picking on you, why you're different. I think that's where the shame comes from, because you feel like you're supposed to know, you feel like you're supposed to be getting along, but obviously you must be doing something wrong because it's not working. And then you start to feel shame when in reality it's not in your control, and they really shouldn't be treating you like that. And that last part you said about you know, not letting their words control you, not letting their shame control you. Personally, that's something I have a really hard time with. I am like a sponge to other people's emotions once I figure out what those emotions are. I'm not the greatest at reading people, but once I get it, it sticks around and it just completely occupies my mind. And it makes it really hard to think straight too, because I'm so consumed by the feelings of shame and being upset about, you know, the fact they're upset, that I end up acting in rather unwise ways. I would give a personal example, but I don't want to get into that because it's a very long story. But suffice to say that I learned the hard way yesterday that seeking closure from people who refuse to give it to you in the first place is never a good idea. There's a reason they refuse to give it to you, and trying to get that closure from them is just going to end up reopening the wound. And I had a lot of shame about that yesterday because I was just like, why did I do that? You know?
What do you I don't want to I don't want to like reopen the wound, but what do you mean seeking closure? Do you mean you wanted to hear them say I was wrong and I shouldn't be so so like that, or what do you
Something
mean?
like that. More like just because the whole hang up I had with the whole situation was that it ended with ghosting. So I just wanted to hear from them one more time. It didn't have to be an apology or anything, but I just wanted to hear directly from them one more time as a bit of closure. But you know, that backfired spectacularly. But yeah, it's shame makes you do really unwise things, and it kind of becomes a self-feeding cycle at that point, because then you're ashamed of your actions from letting the shame control you.
Yeah, I can 100% identify with that because I wanted to comment one thing that you said though. You said as a child being undiagnosed, that was definitely me, even being undiagnosed as an adult. But I would say my childhood experience versus my adult experience being undiagnosed was a little different because as a child, you know, there's a certain age of a child where people kind of let it slide for a while and just kind of, well, that's her, you know, that's our daughter or whatever they want to say. But I never actually knew. I don't know how to put my finger on this, but how you said we feel, I forgot exactly what you said. Oh, we feel that something is, you said something is wrong or something is,
Yeah, I think it's something
sorry,
something different. Like we feel something different about ourselves, but we don't really know what, right?
Yeah, it's weird because I have this problem. I don't know. I always thought that people thought what I thought. So I think this was God's way of protecting me for a while as a child, because I thought people thought what I thought. Then what I thought, I was sure that they thought too. Although it was obvious that they didn't, because it never aligned. But I was like so in la la land. Like I was like, I really didn't know that I thought that they thought what I thought was not what they really thought. If this makes any sense. So
It makes a lot of
No,
sense.
it does.
although
It does.
it really I would say even through my adulthood for a while, I mean, there comes a time when you're just like, oh, because as I got older in high school, my friends would complain like, why do you think that everyone knows that thinks what you think, and I'm like, oh really? But you do, right? And I'm like, no. So like this was kind of a way of protecting me from even knowing. So like I knew that, my like I knew certain things, like, people would like have anger against me, or I've told you 25 times, why don't you listen? Or, these things where I'm just like, I'm 100%, 500% listening to you. I don't know what you're talking about. Like it's hard to explain, but yeah, exactly. It does go in as shame. Even if I didn't know it was, it goes in like, and it starts telling you like, oh, I mean, but because the lucky thing is I thought everyone was thinking what I thought, then I was like, well, this is how it is, this is how I am. And it was lucky that one of my first grade teachers put me in like a special class. So even though like I never like, how can I say, like I never got the exact uh like diagnosis for exactly what was going on. They knew that I had some learning difficulties. So I would say the one thing that I did do though is I kind of I guess I became antisocial in a way, because trying to pass school took every ounce of energy from me. And it's like every waking hour, even now, I pretty much spend on like trying to understand. Like, so I think, yeah, in a way it kind of made me uh, I guess subconsciously I was getting shame from other people, and so I kind of just learned like I don't want to be around other people anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if you're getting shame from social situations, from that fear of disconnectment or being misunderstood or mistreated, I mean, you'd rather be the one to control whether and where you go into those social situations,
I
Yeah,
imagine that a lot of folks have a similar sort of experience with it, and that, I mean, it defines my childhood for, front to back. Uh, I'll bring in a personal story that I hope will be useful to people who are listening, who can then like analogize it to their own experiences, to
Yeah.
come away with like an insight about, shame as a tool of oppression, and how it can, hopefully, we're talking about how it can be subverted, but what are the impacts we can be dealing with here, is what I hope to try to explore a little bit. So I have a visual disability, as many of you will know. The rest don't need to know the details. The point that it brings in is that the manifestations of that disability have not always been cognitive or anything. They've been like executive functional. It's difficult for me to recognize faces, so I hesitate to say, I remember you, specifically you, just without hearing your name. It's difficult for me to get homework done on time. Like as an elementary school child, that was very much an obstacle for me. And so I was, and in elementary school situation is not super disanalogous to like a job, which I later had the same experience, where I just wasn't able to get things done in the time that was sort of allotted to me, so that my general functionality of the job was discredited just by the fact that it wasn't quite fast enough. Anyway, the point that I mean to make is that the experience of shame that I think a lot of people are going to come away with, and the way that it's being used, is couched in the language of worth, of profitability, of utility. It's directly thereby related to disability in that the disability makes, the disability can at least make you less executively functional or less executively functional at this task, whatever it is, than say like, an able person who, all else being equal. But because it is not like directly tied to disability in that you're not being told that you are wrong and bad just for being disabled, because it is couched in the language of utility, like job specific utility or task specific utility, whatever other kind of setting, then it seems in the mind of both parties probably justified, right? Yeah, it's true maybe that you have this like visual impairment thing that's making this the case, but you should still be ashamed that this is the case, because this being the case has an overriding quality to it. This is the system in which we live, the system in which we have to live. It has to be such that people should be ashamed for, being dysfunctional or less than functional optimally at it. And that is, I think, the ideological mentality that we're trying to combat, because it is, I should be clear, ideological. The idea that like everybody is worthy of inclusion and of well-being just in proportion to that person's usefulness to capital or possession of capital is an ideological feature. It's a thing that we, for the most part, believe, if not explicitly, then implicitly. But it is not given. It is not like something that is just philosophically obvious. In fact, I think it's completely philosophically backwards. The point I mean to make is that is how the current manifestation of shame as a tool of oppression. I didn't really talk about the personal side of that, but I think it will suffice to say that like from being brought into a different classroom to do different work with a different teacher from my peers, to being told that I wasn't fast enough at the grocery store at like 20 something, to being 24 now and still in college and stuff. I feel a lot of internalized, I guess it's sort of internalized ableism at this point, just by being slower than someone who I would expect to, the progress that I would expect to see from somebody who is otherwise like me, but without the visual impairment. That might not even be true. I don't know whether and to what extent the visual impairment has been, and the experiences that come with it have been important to my like intellectual development, such that the person who is otherwise like me from birth, but doesn't have the visual impairment, is a jerk, or a bigger jerk, depending. I don't know any of that, but it still seems to be like the case. There's this neoliberal capitalist like shame that's very much been built up in me over time. I guess we've been talking about how to combat it, how to try and like cognitively work your way around it. But that would to do that exercise, I think it's safe to say, would take time. For now, it's very much still the case that like my internal life is largely defined by not just like anger at the system, but shame at my relative inability to fix it. So yeah, and it's just all I want the audience to take away here for sure is just that the fact of it being indirectly tied, the fact of like ableist shaming being indirectly tied to your disability, being tied to like your executive functions and your utility at specific tasks or specific jobs, makes it no less a tool of oppression, no less an ableist thing that is being levied against you, or a racist thing that is being levied against you, whatever it happens to be. It's just that it manifests in the sort of utilitarian way under whatever system is defining whatever utility is. So yeah,
Yeah.
I may not be expressing that perfectly. There's some social philosopher out there who's done this much better than I ever could, but that's something that's worth keeping in mind, that it can be indirect, but
Yeah.
still very much saliently
That
wrong.
reminds me of the phenomenons of white tears and white guilt, I think they're called. That situation where let's say a Black woman and a white woman got into some sort of argument, and it was probably because the white woman was being racist, but then the white woman starts crying, and that creates this engine for shame that is inflicted on the Black woman, that is inflicted on the surrounding bystanders, who will instantly feel shame for the situation, and they'll try to resolve that shame by comforting the white woman and perhaps by attacking the Black woman. And that shame, that is exactly an example of a tool of oppression. And then white guilt, where, you know, a white person hears about how colonials have basically conducted a genocide and continue to do so against Native Americans, and they get really upset about it, but in a way where it's not productive, because all they feel is shame. They just feel shame, and because of that, they're not actually doing anything helpful. You know, for example, if you want to, you know, help make up for that, you can push for land back. You can talk to your senators and your representatives about land back. You can help the protesters at the pipelines. There, you could buy from indigenous creators and indigenous farmers. But what a lot of people do when confronted with the horrifying history, what a lot of white people do when confronted with the horrifying history of, you know, what our ancestors did to their ancestors and what we continue to do to them today, is just kind of shut down and feel guilty. They feel shame. They're like, oh my God, that's so horrible. And then they don't do anything. The shame is almost paralyzing. And that in of itself can be another tool of oppression, because then that generates more sympathy for the white person learning about all these horrible things, rather than the Native Americans who are just asking for your help, you know? I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense of how, like, I guess you feel like shame, like guilty of your past ancestors, and don't really do anything about it, right? Like that in
yeah.
like a really healthy way. Like, oh, you're crying, but like there should be like a better way to cope with it, right?
Yeah, and I feel like taking that step, braving that shame, that's how you can deconstruct it, you know, facing it head on and saying, okay, what can I do to make this better? And one thing you said, William, about the internalized ableism, it occurred to me that I think the one single main emotion behind internalized ableism is shame, because you're directing this shame that you've absorbed from others at yourself, because you're thinking to yourself, after being told it so many times, why aren't you like an abled person? Why aren't you like the way that we want you to be? Why can't you do these things, even though you have a disability that directly impedes you from doing these things? And, you know, when you put it like that, it sounds silly, but it's such a strong feeling of shame, internalized ableism, that it's so hard to get out of your own head and deconstruct it for yourself. I think, you know, I still deal with internalized ableism despite, you know, making great strides in working towards loving myself and my disability. I still feel shame about not being able to do things, especially, you know, if I've been neglecting my physical therapy exercises, and then I suddenly realize that I can't do this thing anymore. I can't do this thing efficiently anymore because of it. I feel a lot of shame around that, but I shouldn't be, because, you know, it was something I was supposed to be doing, but I have a life. I can't revolve my entire life around PT exercises. And I think it's okay to let go of that shame, to say it's okay that I can't do these things, because that's what other people and teamwork is for. I can do other things on my own just fine. And even if I can't do anything on my own, I can still accomplish great things as a team, right?
Yeah, I think there's that shame of like not doing or I guess like what you're supposed to do. That
Yeah.
like, okay, this is like healthy in a way, but like but then like you don't do it, and that's
Yeah.
like really shameful on like everyone, right?
And I feel like a lot of people struggle with that,
Mhm.
you know, eating a healthy diet, exercising regularly, going outside regularly, drinking enough water. I know especially people with ADHD struggle with a lot of shame specifically because of the executive dysfunction. They literally cannot get their brain to cooperate with them to do these basic things that they want to do. And they're blaming themselves for that and shaming themselves for that. The shame is so powerful, and it quite literally leads to depression and anxiety. There's a reason that those things are comorbid with ADHD. Comorbid.
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 Okay.
There's very little chance that Brown in the book Dare to Lead talks about like the shame as a tool of oppression in the way that we want to, just because it's inevitably a book like for corporations and people working for corporations who are the ones doing that kind of thing. However, it's very likely, and this is like something that maybe we could use to recommend this book, it's very likely that she goes into describing and overcoming or working on overcoming the paralyzing effects of shame, the thing that the mental blockage that is keeping otherwise like statistically normal people from doing things like going to the gym, like the sort of or stopping the cycle of procrastination that I experience a lot. Overcoming that kind of thing is probably doable as a matter of psychology, but and probably accessible that way. But like, I don't know whether or not she goes into that. Does she?
Well, I wanted to say one thing, kind of, but the clip that I picked today, she does go on to say about the people around us, for example, teachers, how incredibly important, basically how people really affect us, let's say starting from childhood until now, and how that can have a lasting effect on us. And I think you are totally spot on. This is a book. She accidentally started teaching, companies how to, use human emotions to better treat their workers and have better, stronger companies and so on and so on. And so she doesn't totally go into that, but the point is, we're talking about this right now because she's a researcher of human emotion. And so I will tell you that before I read this book, I never even realized it was shame. Like, I don't know why. I mean, I don't think like that, but the way she breaks it down. So I will say that it's up to us as the reader to like get something out of it the way we want. And how I did like flip around everything because in my I can really relate to all the stories. So I used to feel shame from others without knowing that's what was happening, and then it turned into anger, and then that never is good. So it all and exactly how people are saying you should do this, you should do that, and it all becomes like these weights. And the more that the weights build on us, I didn't realize it was shame, but it becomes so heavy that either you like fall into depression, or you hide under your pillow, or you lock yourself away and don't want to be around people anymore. Like, I didn't realize exactly, I couldn't pinpoint it until I heard her kind of breaking it down. So I will say that I was kind of hesitant to share this because the first part is really kind of like, but then it gets into more the end of the clip that I chose. She says, like, you need to remember the human, like these people, we're all human. So she is talking to like bosses and stuff like this. That is true. But the way that she ties the empathy in, I realized one thing that something I didn't realize before I listened to her book was that I was lacking empathy for myself because of all the shame, which I didn't know it was shame, but for all the shame that's been piled on me from a young child until this, even now, it piles until it gets so heavy that you wonder why exactly what you said, like the exercises you're supposed to do or the things that people say this will really improve your life. Why do you just can't do it? Or why I feel it's those weights of shame that cause us to like kind of have a kind of implosion in a way.
Yeah, I want to highlight that you said that we forget to have empathy for ourselves. Especially in the recent hard times we've all been having. It's important to remember to have empathy for yourself. You're going through a lot, and especially if you're a minority group, if you're part of a minority group, you are already being disadvantaged or put down or attacked, just by existing. You need to have empathy for yourself. You can't be so hard on yourself that you forget to give yourself a break in the face of all these hardships that you've been confronted unwillingly with, empathy for yourself.
Exactly.
And I
exactly.
think on that note, I think we can start wrapping it up because I feel like that's a really good note to end on. Having
Yeah, it is a
empathy
really
for
great
yourself.
note. I guess like before I kind of make the announcements, does anyone have any last words that they want to share?
Any last words? Yeah, the one thing real quick, we're never going to have time for a fuller like conversation about shame because like how it's way too much. But you can definitely like check out the book that we're recommending here. I guess is Dare to Lead by Brown. The thing that I would be interested to talk about is like the merits of shame, like how it can be a tool of or how and whether and how, I guess, because I'm not committed to that idea, but whether and how it can be a tool of emancipation as well, if used properly. Because fundamentally, I think tools are morally neutral. So I hope that it has utility in addition to like its utility for the oppressor class. Anyway, but yeah, I'll just close myself out by saying, where's the ramp? And we're good at podcasting.
I think my last words would be an answer to William's question, how shame can be a good thing. I think shame, when you're open about it, can be a really good way to connect and communicate with people that you love, like your siblings or your parents or your partner. If by acknowledging, by naming that shame and being open about it with other people, I feel like it takes away the power it has over you. And by sharing it with other people, those people can connect with you. They can understand and empathize with the shame that you're feeling, and they can reassure you that, it's okay. You made a mistake. It's fine. Or it's okay. It's not in your control. It's fine. I still love you. I still care about you. I still feel a connection with you. And I feel like that takes the fangs off of shame, because the whole idea behind shame, according to Brown, is that fear of disconnection. So by being open about it and proving that you still have that connection despite the shame, you take away the power of the shame. Those are my last words.
Mm-hmm.
Also, where's the ramp?
I mean, I'm not gonna end it yet. Hey, Kimberly, do you have any last words about this?
Yeah, I guess yes and yes to both of those last ones. And I love that the idea that a tool is a tool, but it's how you use it that makes that tool, what it is for you. And so yeah, that's something to, yeah, definitely. So exactly what was just said right now. So I guess my last words are, yeah, thank you for having me on this show, and I hope that I hope that everyone can use this podcast, and also if you do decide to check out the book, to use the ideas presented in this book as a tool that works for you. So it not necessarily exactly how she presents it, but exactly letting it be a tool or a helper tool to a tool that can work for you. So that's all.
Yeah, so this is the end of our podcast. This is a discussion about Dare to Lead, Brave Work, Tough Questions, Whole Hearts by Brene Brown.
Can't lose.
Oh, is it Can't Lose?
No.
Yeah, but
it's just missing from the title. You have to add "can't lose" to the end of it.
Yeah, I can't. So basically, we just had a discussion about this book and how shame connects with disability, mental health, and like society as a whole. And we'll move on to some announcements. Our 5th official meeting is happening on April 7th, where we'll kind of talk about the rise and fall of the American circus and how it is connected to disability. But next, we have our game night on April 1st. All of our Zoom links will be on the Discord and Instagram. And finally, I just want to thank Kimberly for meeting with us. Yeah, and another announcement is we post episodes every Monday at 12 p.m. on KSSU.com. Thank you for listening. Please check out our socials, blog series on KSSU.com podcast. Our podcast and club meeting schedule is up on social media at Dana@SackState on Instagram. And if you missed anything or the previous episodes or club meetings, check us out on YouTube where we post our recordings there at Dana@SackState. Again, thank you, Kimberly, for talking with us, to being a guest. Bye, everyone. # Where's the Ramp?
Good at podcasting.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
You're listening to Through Our Lens with the Disabled and Non-Disabled Alliance at Sacramento State, a club, organization, whatever, for disabled students, staff, and their allies to discuss and educate each other about disability-related topics, advocate on behalf of disabled students and the community, and to hang out together and just be a community.
So we want to be more recognizable to Sac State. So please join the conversation by following and messaging us on Instagram at Dana@SackState. It's DANA@SackState.